In an effort to prove that the reality of space travel is far more illustrious than the fictions we read as kids, the universe has provided this stately destination, the massive, severed head of an ancient celestial being, floating with a comfortingly lifeless calm through the dark recesses of existence. A gentle rotation should provide just enough gravity to keep our feet on the luxurious ground of soft, supple meat, well maintained through the ages by the preserving vacuum of space. Initial scans also indicate the abundant presence of parasitic, blood-hungry life forms, almost certainly willing, likely with great, even aggressive enthusiasm, to provide us a robust exercise regimen and full lineup of group activities such as desperately fleeing for our lives, screaming in abject terror, and fighting to the death. This truly will be one to write home about. Caliphos.
I think you mean, Caliphos!
Well, that's a matter of perspective.
The planet is crawling with parasitic bloodsuckers. The briefing included the phrase, meat terrors.
Yeah, it's a very special place.
That's one word for it. Another word is intense.
That's fair. Of all the planets you've encountered so far...
Well, it's not even a planet. It's a giant floating head.
Okay, of all the planet-sized destinations you've encountered so far, Caliphos has the most direct pressure.
And this one, it comes in the form of one of the game's only truly antagonistic forces, parasitic bloodsuckers.
On Caliphos, you are being hunted. Monstrous beasts pursue you at every turn. You will have to balance trying to avoid them, luring them into traps, or attempting to destroy them in other ways with, actually doing the things you need to do to complete your objectives. It's not really the science you signed up for, but it's the science that's happening.
It's the science of screaming.
And running.
And toothy flesh tunnels.
Welcome to Caliphos.
When you set up to play Caliphos, first set up the game with the standard setup according to the framework rules.
Shuffle and stack the Waking Nightmare and Bloodsucker behavior cards face down in the area designated for planet-specific cards.
Set aside mystery cards A and B until they're referenced.
Place the Bloodsucker Trap and Doppelganger Trap tokens in the area designated for planet-specific tokens. Place them with the sides that say Build oriented face up.
Then place the red triangle trigger token on the 3rd and 6th spaces of the timeline.
Every survival task on Caliphos begins with the same environmental setup.
In it, the map is built in 2 big sections. 6 environment cards are going to form the exterior or surface of the planet, while the other 6 are going to form the planet interior. As you're setting up the map, leave a clear separation between the exterior and interior sections to differentiate them.
First, place the Scarab, glowing fold, exterior orifice, interior orifice, bony protrusion, and vesicle cluster face up as shown.
Randomly place a nest token on the vesicle cluster, bony protrusion, and glowing fold.
Separate the remaining environment cards based on whether they are exterior or interior nodes. The back of each card indicates which they are. Shuffle each of these stacks and then place those cards face down to build out the rest of the map, like so. The exterior cards in the exterior section, interior in the interior section.
Then place the crew on the Scarab.
Let's do it. Let's start with the thing that's trying to kill you from the moment you arrive. Bloodsuckers.
As you explore the environment of Caliphos, you won't be alone.
These are bloodsuckers.
They're going to be spawning on the map, pursuing you around, and attacking you. Ah! My blood! My blood!
It works like this. When the time marker reaches a Bloodsucker trigger token, reveal and resolve a Bloodsucker's behavior card.
These cards dictate how the monsters act. Bloodsuckers will spawn on their nests, move towards the explorers, and then attack any explorer on their node. In that order.
First, Bloodsuckers spawn.
Gross!
Yep. Place a Bloodsucker, a black block, on each of the nests indicated in the order shown. If a nest is indicated more than once, it will receive multiple Bloodsuckers.
Ugh. For example, in this case, we would place a Bloodsucker on Nest C, Nest B, and Nest A.
Now, in this case, you place a Bloodsucker on Nest C, another on Nest C, and one on Nest A.
If a Bloodsucker would spawn, but there are no black markers available, it simply doesn't spawn. Remember that you spawn the Bloodsuckers on nests in the order shown on the behavior card. So if you reveal this behavior card and you only have one block available, you would spawn that block on Nest C, and the spawns on Nest B and A simply wouldn't happen.
You will notice that Unsettled is a game painstakingly designed to not include rules like, in a tie, the active player chooses where the bad things go, if that's not something you would logically be able to control. We'd say you'll thank us later.
But you probably won't, because you'll be dead.
Yep, we can live with that.
But you won't, because you'll be dead.
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Next, the Bloodsuckers move.
Ugh. Each Bloodsucker, those that were just spawned, as well as any that were already in play, moves the amount indicated by the behavior card toward the nearest explorer.
So in this instance, the Bloodsucker would move one node towards the explorer nearest them.
When moving a Bloodsucker, if multiple explorers are equally close, or if there are two possible paths the Bloodsucker can take to reach the closest explorer, revert to the dots on the Bloodsucker's node to determine their movement.
Those dots represent pheromone levels present in the environment.
Gross!
Not for Bloodsuckers, they're into it. A Bloodsucker will move towards the tied option that takes them over the most pheromone dots on their current node.
For example, these two explorers are equal distance from the Bloodsucker. So the Bloodsucker prioritizes the option that has the most pheromone dots on their node. Ugh! This direction has 2 dots, and that direction has 4, so the Bloodsucker moves on the one that's the most pheromone-y, that 4-dot direction.
The number of dots on the destination nodes are irrelevant.
Here's another example. This Bloodsucker is moving towards this explorer, but it has 2 equal distant paths it can take. So refer to the node edges they'd cross for those 2 options. It moves toward the larger number of dots.
Pheromones. So clarifying.
Quick final side note about the movement. If there's a trap on the map nearer to the Bloodsucker than any explorer, the Bloodsucker will move toward the trap. But we'll cover that more later. Once the Bloodsuckers have spawned and moved, each then attacks an explorer on their node, giving that explorer a distress.
Now, if there are multiple explorers on a Bloodsucker's node, the explorers choose who will valiantly jump forward to take the distress.
In this example, these 2 Bloodsuckers would both attack this explorer, giving them 2 distress. Meanwhile, over here, this Bloodsucker has 2 potential targets. These 2 explorers would have to decide which of them will receive a distress.
Distress from Bloodsucker attacks causes you to experience terrifying visions.
I'm experiencing one right now.
It sounds terrifying.
It is.
What do you see?
Oh, a lot of moist stuff.
Ooh, that is terrible.
Oh, it is.
When you receive any amount of distress, draw a Waking Nightmare card.
Then, roll a discovery die and resolve the corresponding nightmare. Then, return the nightmare to the bottom of the deck.
Remember, no matter how many distress you gain at once, you only experience 1 Waking Nightmare.
It's key to note that Bloodsuckers act in quick bursts and then go dormant for a time.
It has something to do with their physiology or psychology or psychophysiology.
The point is that the Bloodsuckers only do stuff when an effect says they do.
While it's unnerving, entering a node with Bloodsuckers on it doesn't automatically trigger an attack. Bloodsuckers only attack when an effect says they do. So you might find you are often moving through nodes occupied by Bloodsuckers without sustaining attacks.
We've talked a lot about the ways that you're basically bleeped on this planet, but take comfort because you're not totally without defenses.
Let's talk about traps.
If you're on a node with an empty build site, you may build a trap as a free action by spending 1 material and placing an available trap token onto that build site.
If a Bloodsucker moves onto a node with a trap, it is immediately trapped, even if explorers are also present. Place that Bloodsucker onto the trap token.
If a trap has caught 2 Bloodsuckers, it is destroyed. Return it and the Bloodsuckers to the supply.
Remember, when Bloodsuckers move, they will move toward the nearest explorer. The only exception to this is if a trap is nearer to them than any explorer.
For example, in this instance, the trap is 1 movement away and the explorer is 2 movement away. The Bloodsucker will move toward the trap.
In this instance, the trap and the explorer are each 1 movement away. The Bloodsucker will move toward the explorer.
Now recall from the setup that Kelithos is divided into 2 halves, the exterior and the interior.
It's important to understand that the 2 halves are not adjacent to each other. This is represented by the separation implemented during setup. Nodes across that separation are not considered adjacent.
So, for example, you cannot move from this exterior node to this interior node. These nodes are not adjacent.
The only exception to this is the orifice nodes.
Gross.
Whatever, you have orifices too.
Gross!
The exterior and interior orifices, orifi, orifices, are adjacent to each other, which is indicated by special text on their node edges.
So, to recap, not adjacent, not adjacent, adjacent.
The only way to move between the exterior and interior is by moving from one orifice node to the other.
Gross.
And that's it.
That is plenty.
There are a few little nitpicky, nuanced details on the back of the travelogue should you need them, but at this point, you should be all ready to dive into the fleshy, meaty fun that is Kelifos.
Ugh, I will never be ready for that.
You're gonna do it. You're gonna dive right in.
Ugh, stop saying that.
Right into that big, dead alien orifice.
Stop!
Just a big, meaty plump.
Ah!
It's going to be okay.
Sure.
Space is hard. Try not to die.